this is Linkonair. Today I will be reviewing Castlevania Lords of Shadow 2. I'll admit, after the good impression the first game left on me, I was really looking forward to this game, though sadly it didn't turn out very well. Let's get started. In this game you play as Dracula, previously known as Gabriel Belmont. This is given away at the end of the first game, and at the start of the second game, so it isn't really a spoiler. It would have made a great plot twist, too, if it had been executed better. It's just kind of abruptly thrown at you at the end of the first game, and it barely got explained in the DLC, but still. I do think the idea of playing as Dracula in a Castlevania game does sound pretty interesting. The basic premise of the game is that you are Dracula, and you must kill Satan and his acolytes because they are evil, and if you succeed, you get to die and find peace. That is literally all I could figure out. For the majority of the game, it just involved a bunch of stuff happening that I couldn't really figure out. There is also a subplot involving Dracula making peace with his son Trevor Belmont, who he killed and brought back to life as Alucard. I assume that was explained better in the 3DS title Mirror of Truth, at least better than the recap at the start of the game did. Though I think this scene can give you a pretty good idea of what you're in for in terms of story. Though that mess aside, let's talk about the setting. This game alternates between two main hub worlds, one being a present-day Gothic city, and the other being Dracula's castle, which seems to be either a delusion on Dracula's part, time travel, or another dimension. It never really got explained. The best thing I can say about the story is that I like the idea of Dracula as a tragic villain. It's just a shame that it was executed so poorly. Lore scrolls make a return in this game too, and unlike the first game, they fill you in on the world rather than parts of the story that are just going to be told to you regardless. I probably wouldn't be too upset about the story if it weren't for how well told the original game was, and no amount of Patrick Stewart can change my mind this time. The gameplay this time around is largely the same as the first game, though with a heavier focus on combat. As I established with my last review, the combat is fast, skillful, and fairly challenging, with the only issues being enemies blindsiding you because of poorly placed fixed cameras. And this time they're using a free camera, which I thought would help improve the combat, but actually it's rather counterintuitive, as it makes it even easier for enemies to blindside you from off-screen. And this certainly isn't helped by the fact that most combat encounters take place in tightly packed rooms or hallways. Though, to the game's credit, they made it even easier to notice when an enemy's about to attack, so you can take that for either a good thing or a bad thing. Camera issues aside, the combat has seen some improvements. The light and dark magic have been replaced with the Void Sword and Chaos Hands, which are functionally similar to magic, with the Void Sword being a health draining weapon and Chaos Hands being a defense breaker, in addition to increased damage in combat. The additions of these weapons add a nice bit of variety to the combat, and it makes it a bit more enjoyable. Much like the first game, the boss fights are still the highlight of the experience for the most part. In terms of exploration, the world is now open-ended, though I never really thought it really encouraged exploration. There are various locations where you can use newly obtained upgrades to get into areas that were previously inaccessible in the typical Metroidvania style, though personally the world felt so linear most of the time I might as well have been playing Fable 2. This game has pretty much done away with all puzzle platforming challenges and regular puzzles, which was a huge letdown for me because I really enjoyed those in the first game. With no differences in kind, it can make the combat feel like a drag until you encounter a boss to break things up, though they did add something in place of puzzles: poorly executed stealth segments, and while they are short and easily doable, you can remove them from the game entirely and it'd probably be considered an improvement. Though I've gotta say, the idea of stealthing as Dracula sounds pretty good. Also, while climbing is still present, the environments are very cluttered, and it can make it difficult to distinguish grabbable ledges. This was so bad, in fact, that the developers felt the need to highlight ledges with bats and include a button that highlights all grabbable ledges on screen. If those weren't present, this game would probably be unplayable. Okay, let's try to talk about something a bit more pleasant. The visuals of the game are good. Better lighting, better textures, and the character models have significantly improved as well. Though where the game is lacking is in style. Unlike the environments of the first game where everything was tastefully laid out, this game's environments are extremely cluttered, making it hard to tell where to go or what to do to proceed, and seems to discourage exploration, as I mentioned before. The highlight of the game for me was Dracula's Castle. It had the most variety in terms of environments, and if they had just built the game around exploring that, the game would have been infinitely stronger for it. Especially considering how industrial and modern environments are rather dull to look at. Enemy variety is vastly increased, and are certainly more creative than the first game, though the present-day setting largely consists of zombies from Crackdown 2, steampunk hazmat flying suit guys, and goat demons. It's not bad, but it's not very visually stimulating. In fact, a lot of the monsters in the game look ridiculous and barely identifiable. Though now I'm just nitpicking. The visuals for the games are perfectly adequate, though Dracula seems to have gotten his dress sense from Nudist Beach. Now for the soundtrack with the Musical Monocle.
Castlevania is a franchise known for its diverse and effective use of music. Each additional title brings something new to the table, usually by reinterpreting the best motivic elements of the franchise in a unique style which complements that of each specific game. Lords of Shadow certainly delivers in commanding a style which has not been done before to this extent in the franchise. This style is mastered in an even more solidified way with the addition of Lords of Shadow 2. The gothic elements are even more present, and the addition of some electronic elements truly does support the contrast of era in the atmosphere. However, once again, Lords of Shadow 2 succeeds in the unique in the series factor, at the expense of losing some of that which is unique to the series.
Okay, the game gets a 4.5 out of 10. The idea of playing as Dracula as a protagonist was an interesting one, that was poorly executed for the most part. The combat was given more variety, but it was made debatably worse with the free camera. The addition of stealth too was a neat idea, but it was let down by bad execution. Actually, I think that sums up the game as a whole, really. Lots of good ideas that fall short in execution. I can tell this game might end up being a guilty pleasure of mine for the small amount of good bits, but I wouldn't recommend it to anyone that isn't ridiculously into Lords of Shadow 1's combat. I'd recommend skipping this game. Otherwise, you're better off playing Symphony of the Night or Lords of Shadow 1. Though if you've already played those and you want a similar experience, I'd point you towards Strider and Shadow Complex for Metroidvania, and God of War and Dante's Inferno if you want combat that is sort of like Lords of Shadow. If you enjoyed this review, like and subscribe, and feel free to share it with your other gaming buddies. If you have any game recommendations or feedback, leave it in the comments. Next time I will be reviewing Strider, seeing how the PC release of Dark Souls 2 has been pushed back to April 25th. Have a good night.